Hi, and welcome back to my channel, where I tell the short stories of the Irish myths and legends and so forth. So, yesterday we were telling the story of St Brigid, and we got up as far as from her childhood, who her parents were, and her qualities in life. So we'll go on to part two, which takes up after she's been set free by the King of Ulster. So, as Bridget was so beautiful, many men wanted to marry Bridget, but she refused all their offers. It was her intention to found a convent and devote her life to doing good works and helping the poor. One man in particular was determined to have her for his wife, and grew more and more enraged as Bridget steadfastly rejected his advances. "That pure eye in your head is not much use to you if it doesn't look across a pillow at a husband," he jeered. Bridget was so angry and humiliated at this mockery that she pulled one of her eyes out of its socket and lay it on her cheek. Seeing the disfigurement that his daughter was prepared to suffer to remain unmarried, Dubhthach promised her that he would never force her to marry against her will. When she had received these assurances, she put her hand to her eye, and it was healed. Now the first convent that Bridget founded was in County Kildare, and she built a small church there beside a spreading oak. Now one day she was praying in the church, and a pillar of flame appeared above her head and rose higher and higher until it reached the roof of the ridge. A bishop called Mel saw the tongues of fire and knew it was a sign that Bridget had been specially chosen by God. He made her an abbess and conferred on her orders that were the same rank as those of a bishop. Now, some of Mel's clerics objected to a woman being honoured in this way, but the bishop told him that God, not he, had ordained it. As her community grew, Bridget needed a bigger church and convent, so she went to the king to ask him to give her a plot of land on which to build. The king promised her a piece of ground, but because he was reluctant to give away any of his land, he kept reneging on his promise. Bridget kept asking, and the king kept stalling, until finally Bridget lost her patience with him. "Well, at least give me as much land as I can cover with my cloak," she pleaded. The king readily agreed to this, and Bridget took off her cloak. Four of her nuns each took a corner of the garment, as if to lay it flat on the ground. But instead of doing so, they turned round to the 4 points of the compass: north, south, east, and west, and they began to run as fast as they could. And as they pulled, the cloak grew longer and broader until it covered a full square mile. The king was very alarmed. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stop! Please stop what you're doing!" "I'm taking the land you promised to give me," Bridget retorted, "and I'll take your whole province from you as a punishment for your meanness." "I'll give you the ground your cloak covers now, if only your women will stop running," the king cried. Bridget called to her nuns to stop. The king kept his word, and Bridget got the site for her church. Now one rainy day, Bridget ran into the convent for shelter. She took off her wet cloak and shook off the raindrops. Just at that moment the sun came out, and the rays slanted through the window and fell across the room. Bridget spread her cloak over the sunbeams, and they held it up as if they were lying across the rafters, and there the cloak hung until it was dry. Now also, Bridget wanted her community in Kildare to observe the rule of St Peter and St Paul. Unable to go to Rome herself, she dispatched 7 of her followers to go there for the rule and bring it back to her. On their return to Ireland, not one of them could remember a single word they had learnt. So Bridget sent 7 more messengers, and on their journey home they too forgot the rule. For the 3rd time, 7 more members of the community set out for Rome, but this time Bridget asked a blind boy to accompany them. The abbess trusted this boy to remember the rule, for he had never been known to forget anything he had ever heard. Off the Isle of Man, a storm blew up, and Bridget's envoys had to cast anchor near the coast. When the storm died down, they tried to lift the anchor, but they could not move it, for all it was caught fast in the roof of a church under the waves. They cast lots to see who would climber down the rope and free the anchor, and the lot fell on the blind boy. So he slid down the rope, disappeared under the waves, and freed the anchor from the ridge tile of the church. His companions drew up the anchor and waited, but the boy did not come up out of the waves. So finally and sadly they decided to set sail without him and reached Rome safely. A year later they were returning home, and at the exact same spot another huge storm blew up. Again the sailors cast anchor. Suddenly, to their amazement, the blind boy appeared up out of the water and shined up the anchor rope to the ship. In his hand he was carrying a bell, and in his head the rule of St Peter and St Paul, which he had learnt by heart in the church below the waves. When they reached Ireland, the blind boy gave Bridget the rule, and she and her community observed it from then on. The bell was enshrined in a place of honour, and was kept ever after as the bell of St Brigid's community. A little bit more on Bridget's background herself, and the status that she has even today in Ireland. Now, Bridget entered the convent at 18 and died in Armagh when she was 88. She was buried in Downpatrick beside St Patrick, whom she had cared for when he was old and dying. All the days of her life, everything that she touched increased, and anything she prayed for was granted. She was full of compassion and patience, and she was always ready to feed the hungry, comfort the stricken, and befriend the outcast. She was renowned for her miracles and marvels. It was said of her that she was like a dove among birds, a vine amongst trees, like the sun among stars. After her death, people prayed to her for help in time of difficulty and danger. They called on her to calm storms and banish plagues. They believed her to be a prophet, and they named her the Queen of the South, the Mary of the Gale.